Welcome back to another episode of the Benefits Insider. I'm your host, Chris Hamilton, and today I want to talk about what you can do if you're not quite ready to be partially self-insured, but you want to address the rising cost of health insurance in your business. If you want to use your benefits to attract or retain talent, you have to offer something they can't get anywhere else. If you're like some of the employers that I talk to, they really like the concepts of the Benefits Insider approach, which is based on the principles of partially self-insuring. I talk at length about how the fully insured and traditional markets are designed against the interests and goals that you're trying to accomplish. And I hear from so many different employers, and perhaps this resonates with you, for some reason, there could be a number of reasons why companies are not ready to take that step just yet. And you might say, I'm just not ready to be partially self-insured. What else can I do? In this episode today, I'm going to share with you two things you should look at and that we use with some of our clients that are not ready to adopt the full Benefits Insider approach. So the first thing that I do want to point out is that even though you have a fully insured contract today, so think about the big carrier that you work with, there's one of four big ones that most people use. Even though it's technically fully insured, you are still self-funded. It's all those mechanisms are part of your fully insured plan. They're behind the scenes. They don't show it to you. It's just kind of packaged up nice and neat, which is what many clients like. They like having one monthly invoice. You know what your costs are going to be and they're guaranteed for a full year. And it's easy to write the check and move on down the road. The problem, if you're like many companies, you're dealing with escalating premiums at your renewal. I call it delayed self-funding. So you've probably heard this. We just went through most companies went through their renewal period this time and during fourth quarter. And you probably sat down with your broker, and there's a number of you, maybe you heard this year, hey, your claims are high, and that's why the insurance company is proposing this large increase. Maybe it's 20 or maybe it's 30. I mean, we've seen some that are even higher than that. And it's because of your claims. And what I find most interesting about fully insured plans is that the insurance companies do not give you any sort of mechanism or really even good visibility to understand what's driving your claims, and more importantly, ways to address that rising cost. It just kind of is what it is, and you have to go get quotes to get a competing offer, and if you can't, you're just kind of stuck. That's traditionally how the market has worked. That's how many brokers have handled those renewals. So your claims are going to follow you no matter where you go. If you've got people on your plan, they're not really looking to determine what kind of insurance do I have to get cancer or to get into an accident or to have some sort of chronic illness. They're going to get those sorts of things no matter what insurance you have. It's just the question of how do those healthcare costs get paid for, and then how does the insurance company split those costs with you, not just the current year, but at your renewal and 3 years from now, 5 years from now. Most of the companies that we work with, they tell us, I'm going to be in business in perpetuity. I don't plan on selling next year. I need to be able to offer health insurance over the long term and have stability in doing it. And that's really where the focus of that Benefits Insider plan comes into. But you have to I'm a big fan of meeting clients where they are in their life cycle and risk. So I want to share two things that we look at for clients. And these are things that you should also consider if you're dealing with or grappling with those rising costs of healthcare and health insurance in your business, and you're not ready to be partially self-funded. So the very first thing that we look at for our clients is level funding. And I'm not talking about the type of level funding that your broker may have already shared with you. So before I jump into what level funding is, let me explain, in essence, what I'm talking about. All level funding is a way to be partially self-insured, and carriers can package it up to where it looks and feels just like fully insured, where you get a monthly invoice that's very similar to what you're used to paying. There's a number of other considerations that go into this, but by all intents and purposes, it looks and feels like fully insured. But what's actually happening is it's a self-funded product on the back end. It just gives you some extra comfort in knowing that it looks and feels like fully insured, which you may have today. There's a number of considerations that you're going to want to take into from a compliance standpoint, and a handful of other things that you want to get with your broker on just to make sure if it's the right fit for you. But what I want to share with you is not what traditional mainstream brokers are sharing with you today, which if you think about any of the big four carriers, there's two or three of them that have a popular level funded plan. In some instances, it can make sense for clients, particularly if you have really good demographics. It gives you a way perhaps to get a slight advantage in your rates, but I'm not personally a big fan. I don't recommend those to my clients, and it's for a number of reasons. The biggest disadvantage to those is when you're working with a big carrier and you're using their level funded program, just like being fully insured, you're tied to all of the vendors, all of the subcontractors that they own. Primarily, it's their network. They don't allow you to do anything to help reduce the cost of health claims. You're also required to use their pharmacy benefit manager, aka PBM. So you're using their contracted rates for prescription medications, which time and time and time again, every single time we move somebody from a carrier-owned PBM, you're able to generate very large savings, whether it's just the cost of drugs, getting rebates, being able to carve certain costs away from the plan where the members can still get their medications. There's a whole host of advantages of not working with a carrier's PBM. So for those reasons, I'm not a fan of using a carrier's level funded program. Primarily what we're doing today with our clients that are not ready to move to a traditional partially self-funded plan, but they still want those benefits, is we're using level funded plans through TPAs that subscribe and use many of the methods that we use, whether it's a transparent pass-through PBM with cost management programs in there, whether it's care navigation using direct contracts and other bundled surgical programs. It's taking what we know works in the marketplace that allows you to use a major network, but it also allows us to layer in additional benefits to your employees, which if your employees access, they get a choice. If they use those programs and benefits, they get their cost of healthcare waived, their deductibles are waived, and it allows the insurance company, which ultimately at the end of the day is you, it allows you to save money and offer better benefits to your employees at the same time. That's something that we evaluate for all of our clients that are wanting to adopt a benefits insider approach, but they're not ready to step into a captive, or they're not ready to be partially self-funded, but they want to take steps in that direction. The traditional mainstream brokers, what they're bringing to you, let's just say insert a carrier that you like. There's two that are really popular. United Healthcare and Cigna, for instance, have two very popular level funded plans. Here's the deal. In those arrangements, they can be beneficial to clients that are fully insured today, particularly if you have very favorable demographics. Every once in a while, you'll get an offer from one of those carriers that can give you better pricing, but that's not typically what we do. We're talking about taking the benefits insider approach, kind of a skinny down version. You're going to want to do this with an independent TPA, using some of the programs, whether it's pharmacy or care redirection, some of these enhanced benefits that help lower the costs. Some of our clients will look at that and say, it's really neat, just like the traditional benefits insider program, but I'm not ready to even do that. I really just want to stay fully insured. I like the carrier network. I don't want to create any sort of disruption this year. What else do you have? And so that's brings us to the second option that a number of clients will consider. We have several clients that are doing this today. And I call this it's not a technical term, I just call it a mini self-funded plan. It gives you the taste of what self-funding might actually be like, but you remain fully insured, and that's using a concept that I've talked about in prior episodes called a health reimbursement arrangement, or an HRA. And all this is, if you think about it at the simplest terms, perhaps you're offering a $2,500 deductible plan to your employees today. All you're doing in this scenario is you're going to go out and buy a much higher deductible, give your employees that same net deductible. You can tell your employees it's a $2,500 deductible, net exposure to you. I'm buying a $5,000 deductible on the back end. And if an employee exceeds that $2,500 of deductible expense, we're going to reimburse them the difference. So just like with any other insurance, the higher deductible that you buy, you get a discount in premium. It's less insurance coverage. So the employer is self-funding the difference between the deductible they share with their employee versus the insurance policy that they're buying from the insurance company. And there's a number of reasons this might be a fit for companies. Typically, we're going to look at if this data is available. With some carriers it's not. We're going to look at how many large claimants that you have. What's the distribution of claims? What's interesting is when I look at most of the clients that I work with, and the math is true across our entire block that I work with, when you just kind of take an average of your employee population, there's about 80 to 90% of your employees that don't incur much in terms of costs. In fact, I would probably venture to say inside of your company today, 85 to 90% of your people spend less than $5,000 towards their deductible. There's probably 80% that spend less than $2,500 out-of-pocket costs towards their deductible. So there's a real savings potential, and I want to share an example here, what this actually looks like. So the graphic that I'm sharing with you here on screen is an employer that I actually did this for several years ago. And they offered, here on the left side, you can see the current plan that they had. It was a $3,500 deductible. They had 80% coinsurance, and the employee had a max out-of-pocket cost of $5,000. So if an employee had a baby or had some sort of major medical expense that put them in a hospital, their worst case out-of-pocket scenario was $5,000. When we did the math by using this strategy, which you can see here on the right side of the page, we went to those employees and we said, okay, your deductible is going up from $3,500, but we're going to get a $4,000 deductible, but it's 100% coinsurance after the deductible is met. So this is your worst case out of pocket, is that $4,000, which is less than your exposure today. On the back end, what the employer is actually doing is they're going out and buying a $6,650, so almost a $7,000 deductible. And this orange box that you see on top of that $4,000, that's the exposure that the employer is potentially self-funding. So this is where the mini self-funding comes in. If an employee goes in and has a baby or has some sort of major medical event, the employer is going to be on the hook for an additional almost $3,000, let's call it, per employee that goes through that $4,000 deductible. So to share the impact of this was actual numbers for this specific client. When we quoted with fully insured carriers, the one they ultimately selected, it decreased their premiums by 15%. And of that 15% based on their current spend at the time was about $365,000. Now, this is a slightly larger employer, but this is the math for their group. When we looked at the distribution of claimants and we just wanted to prepare based on their actual number of folks that we thought might actually go above this $4,000 deductible, it was 40 to 70 members. You can see here the cost associated with that was about $106,000 to $185,000. Now, we don't know exactly what it will be next year, but this is a good barometer to help the client understand what's my exposure. Theoretically, it would be the total number of employees times this total HRA, the $3,000, but it's exceptionally unlikely that you're ever going to have an event like that where every one of your members is going to have hitting their maximum out of pocket. It's statistically impossible. If somebody disagrees with me, tell me where you've ever seen it, but I have never seen that. I've never even seen 20% of the people hit their maximum out of pocket. So we feel pretty confident in these numbers using our tools for analysis. But what you can see here is when you take that total premium saved of $365,000 and you net out the reimbursements, you get a net savings of anywhere between $180,000 and call it $260,000. This is real money kept in the employer's pocket. The employers will continue to accrue and fund to this. And at the end of the year, what I'll tell you is at the end of the year, this employer actually saved more than $260,000 because we had a fraction of the people need to be reimbursed. And after doing this for multiple years, ended up with a very significant balance on their balance sheet that they were able to retain to help offset cost increases in subsequent years. Now, where I'm going with this is a perfect setup. It's a perfect stepping stone into partially self-funding, because here's the deal. They really are partially self-funding part of the deductible. It's only $3,000 roughly, right? I'm just rounding the math up here. But when you go into partially self-funding, it's very similar to this arrangement, but instead of partially insuring this $3,000 deductible, and once you see this in action over multiple years, the question employers will ask me is, well, why am I just buying a $3,000 extra deductible? Why don't I go out and buy a $40,000 and get my insurance premium from $2 million and get it down to $500,000. You can drop your premium that much just by raising the deductible that high. And we see what our employees are spending, and I think that's a good trade-off. And so these two ideas are ones that we use to help stair-step or baby step employers towards moving into a captive insurance program or partially self-insuring with their own stop loss. It gives you the ability to take advantage of cost savings in year one. I would say the better of the two is probably going to be the level funded plan with all the cost saving measures rolled into it. If you're using an independent TPA with independent pharmacy benefit and stop loss and all of those things, that's kind of the baby step that I would take. But knowing that it's important to meet clients where they are with the risk tolerance that they've got, understanding what level of disruption they're willing to go through from it, not just a benefits design standpoint, but administratively. Sometimes you just look at it and say, based on the timing, I'm not really to make any sort of change like that. So these give you two options to address the cost. The one thing I hate more than anything, and I hear this from groups that I speak to, prospective clients, they'll tell me when I ask about how did your renewal go. So if you're seeing this and it's January or February or March, your renewal is probably already done. But I'll meet with groups at that point in time just to kind of review how the renewal went. And they'll say, well, my broker showed up and I got a 28% increase and they told me there's really nothing that could be done. Well, in my experience and in my opinion, that couldn't be further from the truth. A broker's job is to bring you options, preferably 2 to 3 options, and it's up based on their recommendations and your tolerance to be able to select from those 3 options. No option is, in my opinion, is unacceptable. There's always an option. Now, you may not like one of them, and that's okay, but it's incumbent upon all of us brokers, advisors, and consultants that are out there to be able to bring something to you to help you address what your main goals and concerns are. So I hope this episode was helpful. If you've got questions about either one of these arrangements and how they might work for your company, feel free to reach out to me. You can always visit my website where I give away the Benefits Insider Playbook that shares the strategies that we're using with our clients to help reduce costs, increase profitability, and drive more value in their business. So until next time, use these tips to add more profitability to your bottom line and more money in your employees' paychecks. Take care.